Hey, hey.
Work smarter where you want.
This is learning at its most fun. All right, welcome everybody to another Redtail Practice Management Spotlight. Now, for those of you who've never been on a Practice Management Spotlight or watched one of our practice management webinars before, it's an opportunity for us to sometimes step out of the CRM and approach, as you may have guessed, practice management topics, strategies, things like that for our users, for our financial advisors. So if you're coming to Practice Management Spotlights looking for in-depth Redtail CRM one-on-one training, we're not going to be doing anything like that today. However, we are going to be talking about passive versus active recruiting, bringing in recruitments, bringing in and increasing the ROI of that strategy. And today I'm going to be talking with Ryan Shanks about how to shift away from passive recruitment strategies towards an active one, why that's critical to making meaningful connections and impact your bottom line. I'm big on connections. I'm big on relationships. It's one of the things that I am genuinely passionate about talking about, and I'm excited to talk about it with Ryan today. Now, for those of you who don't know, Ryan is a co-founder and CEO of FA Match. And FA Match is a digital recruitment platform that launched earlier this year, so it's still pretty fresh. And what it does is connecting wealth management firms with advisors seeking meaningful career transitions. Now, Ryan's got over 20 years of experience working as a recruiter and as a sports agent for financial advisors, as he likes to say. I like that bit quite a bit. Ryan also founded a boutique recruiting firm, Fine Tooth Consulting, in 2006. I've worked with Ryan before. I love having conversations with him, and hopefully at the end of this webinar, you're going to be able to take away some things about how your firm can get the most out of your recruitment efforts and avoid wasting time, wasting money, wasting energy on those relationships that just aren't paying out. So with all that being said, Ryan, again, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for coming on and talking with us a little bit. I think that this is probably a topic that's not talked about enough. I don't see it talked about enough. So kind of right off the bat, we talked about passive versus active, right? What's the difference between those two recruitment strategies, would you say?
Yeah. So first of all, man, I really appreciate you having me on. I always enjoy our discussions, and I'm glad to be able to do this with you. Passive and active, you're right. This is never really talked about and addressed. People just go, well, I'm recruiting or I'm not recruiting. I think that passive recruiting is the closest kin to not recruiting. It's doing as little as possible with an assumption that you're going to somehow attract advisors to the firm that you're operating. Active is you're obviously very specific, right? You know exactly what your value proposition is. You know who your target market is. You know how to articulate it to them, and you're actively engaging in those discussions one-to-one to try to drive that process.
That's awesome, man. Now I am not, full disclosure, many people might not know how much of a fraud I am, but I don't have a history. I didn't study about the financial industry. I didn't go to school for that. So can you give not only me, but obviously those on the call, an example for what each would look like?
Yeah. So you want to know kind of the passive versus the active. So
yeah.
An example is going to be on a passive side and this happens a lot, right? This is you're an OSJ, you're reaching out to your broker dealer. You might be an RIA, so you're reaching out to a custody partner. You may be golfing with wholesaler, and you're like, hey, listen, if you come across some advisors, I'd love for you to, think of me and maybe kick them my way. That is classic passive. And what each of those folks are hearing when you ask it from them that way is that you're looking to do as little as possible for as much upside as possible. You've not thought through who you really are as an organization and whether you add value to the advisor. And I'm not sure I'm going to go out there and kind of, jeopardize my reputation, even though we have an affiliation, if I'm not quite sure that you've got that process worked out, right? And if you're really serious about it. And I hear this a lot where advisors will talk to a firm, they're very, very interested, and they're really just stringing them along. They don't really have anything in place. They haven't really thought through. We don't know how we're going to compensate them. And that's a waste of everyone's time.
Okay, nice. And Listen, I'm probably guilty of that as well a little bit. Doing the minimum amount of work and expecting a decent sort of ROI or rate of return or whatever it may be. And I have to imagine that that's what a lot of people are doing, right? And that there's not a lot of people doing active. Is there a major difference between active? Why is it the case that more people are passive?
Well, no, I guess what I meant was that this is really the situation around passive, right?
Gotcha.
I think from a passive and an active, I mean, active is, you have people on your staff you're paying, their sole purpose is to recruit, right? That is the opposite spectrum. You're active, you're incurring an operating expense to try to communicate your value proposition to advisors who are affiliated or employed elsewhere, right? So that's a real big kind of delta between the two of those.
Gotcha. Now, again, why do you think firms end up falling into a more passive approach? Why is that the case? Now, I could probably speculate and say it's easy to be lazy. But how do you get away from that? Like active, like here you go. How do you build an active recruiting strategy? What's the major difference between the two? Effort is one thing.
Yeah. Well, listen, if you think about, the folks who are out there that are recruiting, right? An OSJ, an independent broker dealer, et cetera, the advisors that are seeding those businesses, right? How did those firms originate, right? So an OSJ, for example, they made a move from somewhere, right? They made a move from somewhere. Most likely they were captive, they were an employee, and they felt like, gosh, I'm going to take on some risk to go create my own brand, my own business, and I'm going to trust this broker dealer to support me appropriately. So what that advisor knows is client service, right? What that advisor knows is investment advice, planning, right? Retirement planning. What they don't know is recruiting. So what ends up happening a lot is they look around, they'll go to a conference and they'll see that, some of their peers are growing by doing this thing called recruiting. So they're like, well, gosh, if I just say that that's what I want to do, then surely I'm going to be successful.
Sure.
And again, that's back on the passive side. And that's what's happening is they don't really know how to articulate it, which is not very complicated, right? You essentially just say, look, I put all these things in place to best support me and my clients, and then step back and go, gosh, could other advisors see the same value that I'm seeing?
Interesting.
Right.
That's yeah, of course. I mean,
so that's how a lot of this takes place. You're an advisor, you're focused on your client care. That's where your attention is, and it's where it should be. And all of a sudden you sort of evolve to where you're like, gosh, I'm now sort of running this company. And maybe the technology that I've chosen, maybe my planning process, maybe how I'm engaging in the marketplace is something that would be attractive for some other advisors. And then it starts to kind of kick into that gear around recruiting. And so a lot of times, and it's not really anyone's fault per se, but a lot of times sort of how a pivot happens from passive to active is accidentally stumbling across a couple of advisors, having a conversation, and they accidentally stumble into your business and make a transition. And you're going, hey, we're sort of a party of three now. Right. Then you all of a sudden start thinking, okay, I've got greater responsibility. My company is now not only just serving my end clients, it's serving other advisors and their clients.
Okay.
Then you start to really truly build a business. And that's where that active can start to kick in.
Definitely. Now you have and again, sometimes I always say this all the time. I say this about my health habits. I say it about a number of things, right? What's the law of physics? Like an object at rest stays at rest, an object in motion stays in motion, right? And that's, to me, is what a lot of this sounds like. Although you do bring up a good point about stumbling into it. Can you grow more off of that? I see the number one, doing your homework. I have to imagine that there are some other elements into building that active recruitment strategy beyond just stumbling into it, right?
That's it. That's exactly right. And again, there are companies, I'm working with an advisor right now that's looking at leaving a wirehouse, right? And he is determined he wants to build his own brand. And he's already talking to me about phase 2, which is he moves over, gets his clients to come over, and the thought about bringing other advisors in to service those clients so he can step into a CEO role to focus on growing a business. That is very intentional. And there is a lot of that in the business. But there's also, again, there's the other side. So that's what you start to, that's active, right? That is, I want to go out and I want to attract other advisors to my company because I believe we are providing value greater than our peer group. And I think we've priced it right.
And that ties into something that I teach a lot about. You mentioned right here, play to your strengths, understand your value. The thing that I encourage when I do Red Tail Universities, I ask our attendees, what is your experience? What makes you special, not only to clients, but also to, in this case, obviously other advisors. Make that passion recruitable. How, brand is the kind of business buzzword, so to speak. But it's all about the experience. It's all about the relationship that you provide. And I have to imagine that will target, whatever it may be, a specific advisor, right?
That's exactly right. And to my point with the slide that we're really, we're on right now around the passion.
Right.
Right. Where that really comes from is most of these firms that are recruiting stem from someone who provided advice to their own clients, whether they continue to do it or not. And that stems from a desire to help people navigate the markets, to make an investment, to try to drive a return greater for the future, right? So if you can really share that passion and get people to engage with your whole purpose, this is why I'm in this business, is I want to be a steward on behalf of these clients, and I want to do what's best for them and look out for them. Other advisors relate to that, right? So that's really that whole passion driving into that recruiting strategy. You don't want to go out there and say, well, I mean, a lot of people do, but oh, well, I got this technology and this technology, and that's great. But there are components of those things that are just part of the ecosystem that you have to operate, right?
Definitely.
It's like a car that has to have 4 wheels and a steering wheel and an engine and
Definitely.
a battery or gas, right? And so it's the same here. So it's about really driving that passion.
Definitely. To take the analogy one step further, every car that's a good car has the 4 wheels, the gas, the engine, and stuff like that. What are your add-ons? That's something that I always like to get people to think about too. Like, what are your add-ons? People like muscle cars, people like trucks, people like sedans, people like minivans. What comes with all of that is something that I always like to encourage people to talk about too.
That's right.
I won't get too deep into the analogy, because then we'll be talking about
but I love it.
Heated seats.
Yeah, and listen, I mean, this is a situation where that's the beautiful part about the independent landscape, right? It really is that you can pick and choose any, components to plug in and operate, right? Where you're, and again, you go back to sort of the active, there has to be someone in the car to drive it, right? That's this person that's actively recruiting. But you're exactly right. All the sizes and shapes it's phenomenal.
Yeah, definitely. It's all a matter of, as we see here, getting to know your ideal advisor, who's your ideal peer. If your goal in a business, and I'll let you speak on this more obviously, but if your goal in a vehicle is to haul equipment, you don't want to buy a Dodge Charger. That would not be the ideal parts to your end goal. You want the ideal parts to your end goal. So talk about that a little bit more, about getting to know your ideal advisor. I think that's really important.
Well, and the whole thing around the peer is to think about, like, what is it you've created to support your clients, right? Think about your process. And at that point, it's really trying to get dialed in with, if you could clone you as an advisor avatar type, can you go out and identify other advisors that are sort of similar to you in terms of how they interface with the client? If it's planning focused, right? If it's money management, et cetera. And it's really going out and finding those folks and identifying, are they experiencing some of the same points that you have? But it's also a shared value system, right?
Definitely.
If you and I are very, very closely aligned in terms of how we are interfacing with clients, the both of us together communicating about this business should make both of us better, right?
Absolutely.
So it's the sharing of that. And so it's, first of all, going out and trying to identify, because a lot of firms go out and they're like, oh, we're active and, we're doing all fee-based. But I'm going to go out there and I'm going to talk to this advisor that's doing all brokerage, and I think I can convince him, or I'm dealing with a client base that's got an average investment of $250,000, and I'm going to truly try to engage with this advisor that's got an average client of $2 million is an average investment. Right? Those aren't really good fits. It's like a family office to sort of the mom pop. Right? There's nothing wrong with both sides of those, but they don't necessarily interconnect with the scalability, right? And the service standard that you're going to want to provide those clients. So a lot of that's tied to really identifying your peer.
Definitely. It seems very simple, it seems like when we bullet point it out, don't, if you don't like, or if not, even if you don't like, but if it's just not in your business, if you're not working with that large of an AUM, if you're not working with that large of a client, there's no need to go and try and connect and recruit people who are that, almost look for those like minds, look for those circles. I see it on the internet all the time. The internet helps with that. It helps build these little communities. And that's what we're talking about here. People with like minds, like goals, like approaches, tend, and this will come as a shock to no one, tend to thrive together, right?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
But you got this last one, leave your ego at the door. And I know that that can be difficult for some people, myself included. I do want to reiterate a lot of, the stuff that I teach with Redtail, the stuff that we teach with the practice management session, the stuff that I try and do as a trainer with Redtail is almost the same mentality as any other type of training, as any other type of training. I'm a big analogies guy. So obviously we were talking about the car and finding the pieces of the car, but another big analogy that I like to use is like personal training. It's like anybody who's ever been to the gym, anybody who's ever tried to lose a couple of pounds, the steps are there. Like it is easy to understand what I need to do to get in better shape. You need to stop eating pizza. You need to run more. You need to lift a little bit, drink more water. Like it's easy to list these things out. It is harder to do them. And that's why, and I see Ryan's popping on again real quickly here, but that's why this number 4 is oftentimes the hardest thing to do. It's getting over that hump. It's actually execution, right? To bring up the little physics joke I made earlier, an object at rest stays at rest, an object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. Hopefully this webinar, hopefully this is that outside force. Rick. Hey, you're back.
Hey, bud. You know what? I tell you, in my office, there's construction going on, and I don't know if I need to point the finger at them or not, but I apologize.
It is okay. I've been riffing for a little bit, so don't you worry about it, my man. I was just talking about how this leaving the ego at the door and actually taking the step and making the change can sometimes be the most difficult part of all this.
That's it. Well, and also on the firm side, right? Remember, like you've built this business for you and your clients, and oftentimes you want to talk about it. You're proud of it, and you should be. But when you're engaging in recruiting, specifically on the active side, right? You're really being thoughtful about this. You need to really get to know that advisor and what's going on with their clients, how they're servicing them, and be able. If you listen enough, you'll be able to understand where your connection points can add value, right? And if not, you need to be truthful enough. Again, no ego there as well. I'm willing to be vulnerable enough to say that we're not a good fit.
Right.
Right. What you're doing with your clients, we're not a good fit. And a lot of firms struggle in that area. And I think advisors, unfortunately, pay that price.
Yeah, sadly, it happens quite a bit. I know it's not an exact one-to-one comparison, but I know that one of the big things that I look for when I'm looking to bring on new trainers from my team is fit, culture, attitude, energy, all of those little intangibles, beyond just okay, I'm used to working with, $500,000 accounts and you're used to working with $5 million accounts. Like that's an easy comparison to make. We're dealing with numbers here, but the intangibles are really important. Knowing your purpose, differentiating needs and wants is extremely, extremely valuable. Now, obviously,
that's exactly right.
Now, obviously, you and I, we're in tech, right? You just started FA Match earlier this year, the digital recruitment platform, and I've been doing this song and dance with Redtail for a long time. But you started this technology company. You started FA Match that streamlines the recruitment process, right? So,
right.
In your own words, how can technology in general, and I have thoughts on this, but how can technology in general help firms with their recruitment goals?
Well, I think specifically, in terms of how we see the market, I think it drives automation, right? So you've got this big, broad marketplace, 37,000 financial advisors make a move on average per year, right?
Wow.
So these advisors are going out there. They know before anyone else knows when they're unhappy, right? They're then going out there and they're going through the normal course of recruiting. They're dealing with, folks who don't know enough of the marketplace, wholesalers who may or may not know good firms, friends who've made a move in the past, et cetera. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, well, gosh, what if we can automate that and bundle it? And we've got advisors and firms in one portal where both of them are on the offensive. Both of them are active, not passive. Right. So that's really where our focus has been. If an advisor's not happy, we try to create an environment where they can register on the platform, control their privacy, which is important, have full transparency into what the opportunity looks like, and have control of whether or not they want to share their information with that firm by a connection request. And if it's not reciprocated on the firm side, that connection never takes place, nor should it. We're also trying to prevent lots of phone calls that happen over the course of the year when firms are trying to recruit advisors that aren't good fits. So when it comes to technology, how can you index data in a way that doesn't require a lot of time to get registered and active?
Right.
And how can you view that data, and how can that data lead to decisions? And when we looked at this and assessed the marketplace, we said, look, it's not overly complex. The conclusion you need to reach by looking at the data is whether or not you want to have a conversation with that person or that firm. It's that simple. And if you do, based on the data that's indexed, you ought to be able to have a simple, streamlined way of connecting and having that conversation in private.
That's really cool, man. I know you probably, I don't know if you will hate my comparison or not, but technology is bridging relationships all the time, whether it be dating apps, whether it be social media. And I find the existence of this absolutely fascinating, because in my time going to conferences, talking with advisors, it's natural to find people who are unhappy in their current situation. This is the first, and I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but this is the first time that I have seen some type of connection tool built where you can find those like-minded advisors, where you can help, be more active, give that little push. Because sometimes it's daunting to just look out into the world. I was looking at auto glass repair earlier today, and I just Googled auto glass repair, and it just hundreds of people showed up. It's like, whoa, where do I even begin to start this? By looking at a profile, by looking at just from what I see here, what the AUM works with, what this is about, giving a little blurb about yourself, your firm, you as an advisor, and allowing people to see those blurbs and act on them. That seems very valuable to me.
Well, look, that's our bet, right? We believe that it is. What you're seeing there on the screen right now is obviously showing somebody's name, their credentials, and their information. And that really means is that they and a firm both have the same interest in connecting. Otherwise, all of that information is private.
Right.
So, again, you're exactly right. Look, we look at this, and I talk to advisors all the time that have made a move in the recent past, and they realize that it wasn't the right move. Well, how could you have done better?
Right.
And then what we've tried to do is we've tried to take it a step further, and we've tried to really create connectivity to the entire marketplace, where we're partnering with recruiters who are in this space and saying, hey, you're talking to advisors every single day. Do you know enough firms to introduce them to that are good fits? Or are you kind of going back to the usual suspects? Because we can help you there.
Definitely.
Right? We're talking to financial services companies, OSJs, and we're saying, look, do you have an advisor in your pipeline and it looks like he's not going to join your firm? You can refer him to our platform so that they can find a better fit elsewhere. So we're trying to create this ecosystem to where if we leave our ego at the door and we're all transparent and humble enough and honest enough to know what a fit is and what a fit isn't, and we can share back into that ecosystem the overall marketplace benefits, and most importantly, the advisor.
Absolutely. And, and listen, as great as FA Matches is looking as an option, I always like to remind people that, shoot, and I struggle to say this even as the red tail guy, you can go out there, you can do this stuff. We gave you those 4 key elements that you can jump on right now, doing your homework in regards to the competition, identifying who you are, what your brand is, what's your value add for advisors, making that passion something that's recruitable, getting to know who you want on board, who your ideal advisor is. And then the hardest part sometimes, leaving the ego at the door. Those are things that people can do right now. FA Match
do all of that right now.
Exactly.
That's exactly right. What it just really requires is it requires some time to think through. what is it you've created? How
Right.
do you communicate that value proposition in a message
Right.
that an advisor is going to hear and like? Right now, obviously, that message needs to be validated back to things that you can in fact deliver on.
Sure.
Right. So you've got to be truthful about what it is you can do. And
Yeah.
and if you're identifying that peer group, right, you're identifying folks who've got potentially the same issues.
Mm-hmm.
So you're exactly right. That's where you create the value for them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And do you see now? This is kind of a question I'm just pulling kind of out of thin air here, but that you bring up honesty and checking the ego at the door. Do you see a lot of people having an issue with that, or do you feel that there's not too big of an issue with it, and that's why something like FA Matches is and can be successful? To me, honesty has been always my first priority. You set an expectation and you meet that expectation. But do you see that being a massive hurdle? I mean, obviously it's one of the key elements, but do you see that being a massive hurdle?
It's interesting. It's almost unfair for me to answer it, right? Because you're dealing with just this large population of people.
Sure.
And psychology is involved, and confidence of something that you've built is involved. Being in sales mode. Oh gosh, I accidentally overpromised something. Well, I'm just going to kind of keep it out there.
Right.
Again, it's you have to think about the disruption that you're causing by misleading someone, right? When you're talking about advisor recruiting, it's not like, it's somebody that sells cars for BMW and they go across town and they're now selling it for Lexus.
Right.
You're talking about if somebody makes a move, they want those clients to come with them. They have to repaper those accounts, transfer them over, and plug them into the chassis of the new organization you're with. Right. And part of that is psychology to the client going, well, gosh, you're making this move. Why?
Right.
Well, Mr. and Mrs. Klein, I'm making this move because I can better serve you over here.
Right.
If all of that is done for you to then find out that the firm made some promises they can't keep, you can't turn around and go, well, gosh, I'm going to move again tomorrow.
Right.
Right. You have to regroup. I tell people you need to give it 18 to 24 months at minimum. If you made a mistake in your transition, that's the price you have to pay.
That is.
Before you can consider moving somewhere else, because it's too disruptive. Because what ends up happening is if you move too quickly, two transitions in too tight of a window, the clients are going to go, I'm not sure you're doing proper due diligence and know what you're looking around to do. Perhaps there's other issues I should be concerned about. And it questions that retail customer, their opinion about you and your decision-making as their advisor.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. Well, this is awesome, man. I mean, again, I love giving people those action items and things like that. Obviously, if there are any questions, we're happy to answer them. Go ahead and submit them into the Q&A. But those action items, building that active recruitment strategy is something they can do right now. But you have your contact information right up there. Is that just the easiest way for them if somebody's interested in checking out FA Match and implementing it? That's the easiest way to go about it?
That's exactly right. I would say send me an email right there, Ryan at FA Match. I'm super responsive. I'm very passionate about what we're building here. We're trying to drive value. We're welcoming feedback from the entirety of the marketplace. And the other thing that I would say is, if anybody's on here and they want these slides to be able to look at, and they didn't get a chance to kind of jot it down as I was sort of blowing off the call and coming back on, I'd be happy to share those. So, there's nothing proprietary there versus it's just really telling people that, look, these are the positions that you could take to be on one side or the other. And if you want to be on this one side, these are the considerations that you need to really focus on.
Absolutely, man. That is awesome. Well, again, Ryan, I want to thank you for your time today. I think this is really good stuff. I think anybody can act on it right now if they wanted to. And if not, then FA Match is there and available. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate the time of everybody who was on board.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Definitely, man. My pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us today for this particular session. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call at 800-206-5030, option 3 for support, or just shoot us an email over to support@redtailtechnology.com. Thanks a lot and have a great day.